Time to talk motoring here on Business Talk, and it's something close to my heart, and I'm sure many South Africans' hearts. We are indeed a nation of petrol heads, but also a country through various automotive policy support programs offered by government through the decades that has become a global motor manufacturing powerhouse, certainly relative to our size. Now, Ford Motor Company recently announced organizational and leadership changes for its international markets group, with Neale Hill, MD of Ford South Africa, appointed president of Ford Motor Company Africa, and that became effective on the 1st of October this year. Neale, chapeau, that's a fine achievement. What does this new role entail?
Well, Michael, first of all, congratulations, and I'm very humbled by the opportunity that the company has afforded me to lead the company's efforts in Africa. What it really does is it pulls together Africa as a continent that Ford Motor Company sees as one of the real growth opportunities for the future ahead of us. But also recognition of the role that the South African automotive industry plays on the continent in terms of its manufacturing footprint. When you think about the 7 OEMs that are present in South Africa, producing vehicles by and large for export operations and also supporting domestic requirements. And then also looking ahead to the formation of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, and really Africa opening up as a growth market for future vehicle sales and satisfying customers' needs. So that's what we're looking at, and we're looking to consolidate our footprint in Africa and leverage the resources and the opportunities and the understanding that we have of the African continent. So that's a little bit behind the move that, why we've made the move that we have.
And I believe your Sub-Saharan African HQ is in Casablanca, Morocco. So a little bit more travel potentially in your future as well.
Yeah, I'm sure I'm going to get to see Morocco, which I'm very excited about it. Having previously been involved with our Sub-Saharan Africa operations, that was I have already visited a couple of countries, but we've got some cornerstone markets in our distributor setup across Sub-Saharan Africa, and then new in terms of my exposure this time, as well as picking up North Africa, so Egypt, Algeria, Morocco. So some very interesting and very exciting times as Africa becomes a real powerhouse trading bloc with the 54 countries that are participating in the African Continental Free Trade Agreement.
It's incredible how much I think we actually underestimate that in the broader public in South Africa, just how big a move that opening up of the African market has become. And I think it's because we've spoken about it for such a long time. Many doubted we'd have the political will to get it over the line, but it is over the line. And we've got our own Wamkele Mene as the Secretary General, and he's working tirelessly to ensure that we can now hammer out all the little details around tariff line item by line item. Now, Ford Motor Company is a huge investor in the local economy. And I think it was earlier this year that you announced that $1 billion investment into South Africa. At the time, it was probably more towards 15.8 billion rand. It's probably now just under 15 billion rand. Can you just run us through how this money is being spent?
With the greatest pleasure, Michael. So, the investment is really aimed at increasing our installed capacity and gearing up for the next generation Ranger that we're going to be building in South Africa. And the installed capacity that we're aiming to achieve is actually going to go up from currently 168,000 vehicles up to 200,000 vehicles, which will make us the largest exporter of commercial vehicles from South Africa and the largest manufacturer. This is to support the increased capacity and demand that we're seeing both in our domestic sales, but also in terms of our export markets and, supporting more than 100 markets globally. Part of that money that we're spending is really aimed at modernizing our facilities. So really looking at upgrades and new facilities that we're adding to the operation. And in particular there, I want to call out the fact that for the first time, we're going to be bringing stamping of of sheet metal parts in-house. So traditionally, this is something that we've had suppliers doing for us, but we felt that that is such a key piece of our business that we've invested quite a sizable portion of that $1 billion into our own stamping facility. We've also upgraded various parts of our body shop, so we're bringing in the latest robotic technology, bringing our facility on par with the rest of the Ford global facilities. So we've got consistency in terms of manufacturing processes. aimed at really delivering a quality product that we can learn from sister plants, and we can also inform the system as we go forward in terms of doing that. Another big change that we've made is also the separation of the line that assembles the load box that goes in the back of our pickup ranges. Now, this doesn't seem like a big change, but when you think about the ergonomics of trying to build a vehicle with a load box right behind the vehicle, it impacts on our ability to be able to, fit the parts properly, avoid nicks and scratches and dents on the line. But it also makes it easier for our line operators to build a better product more efficiently and also more consistently. So that's something that we're really looking at. And then a big chunk of that, a portion of that money, I should say, probably about just under $400 million is going into our supply base. So the people who are actually supporting the parts that go into our vehicles, they're a crucial piece of the ecosystem, making sure that we've got latest technology building parts that go into our vehicles. So it's a whole comprehensive ecosystem that we're investing both internally in Ford Motor Company, but also with our suppliers who supply the parts to us. So, huge chunk of investment, and very exciting to see the progress that it's making.
Yeah, I was going to say it's a very exciting development for the entire ecosystem of the motor industry in the country. And I've got to come and visit your Silverton plant when it's all done, because it really sounds like it's going to be state of the art, world class. I mean, what impact do you see this having on overall vehicle production and employment in the country?
Well, I think as a starting point, we mentioned that we're going up to 200,000 vehicles. It's going to expand our production facility by an additional 1,200 incremental Ford jobs. So that increases our workforce to approximately 5,500 people in South Africa. So that's absolutely fantastic, especially in the economic times that we're finding ourselves right now. Job creation is such a critical element of it. In addition to that, we estimate that there's approximately another 10,000 jobs that will go into our local supplier network. That will bring that total up to about 60,000 people. So from an important, just from a straight employment perspective, that's almost 11,500 jobs that we're going to be creating directly. Then also, we've got training facilities and modification and vehicle mod centers that we're going to be adding into the facility that not only create jobs, but they also upskill people in terms of the training that we're going to provide to them. And then a further component of the work that we've been doing is also working in close conjunction with the three spheres of government. And here we're talking about, the Tshwane Special Economic Zone, but also working very closely with Transnet, who are such a critical supplier or a cog in the wheel, I should say, in terms of the overall logistics network. So we're working with Transnet in terms of developing the Gauteng Eastern Cape high capacity rail freight corridor, of opening up an alternative avenue of freight between the Gauteng region and the coast. Durban is the primary area at the moment, but concerns over congestion and just capacity in the Durban port. So that's why we're looking to open up the port in Port Elizabeth as part of that. Now, part of that just opens up a huge amount of expansion that Transnet need to do, and investment in infrastructure and jobs as well, which I'm sure they'll talk about separately. But really exciting in terms of how one decision has a ripple effect through multiple spheres of the economy, and creating jobs and investment throughout.
And also underscoring the importance of policy certainty. And I know a lot of people quibble about, well, the support that the automotive sector gets in order to create this industry, and is it worth it, and the net benefit to the fiscus. If you look at this one decision and how it ripples through the economy, the supply chains that are boosted and nurtured, the skills that you're now developing, I often say in South Africa we have less of an unemployment crisis, more of a skills crisis, because there's so many open tech positions, for example. If we had the right skills, we could certainly employ people. It just shows you how important policy certainty is, because that's really what's underpinned a lot of this for Ford, isn't it? The ability to have line of sight over very long planning cycles.
Michael, that's absolutely critical. I mean, I think, we often talk about this within the company and also within the industry body, NAMSA, about the decisions that we're taking are not 1 and 2 year decisions. We're setting up an investment for a decade. And, when you think back, we launched this current generation Ranger that we're selling today in 2011. And you look at the volume that we've been able to produce of that vehicle. We've exceeded 730,000 vehicles over the last decade. So these decisions are absolutely critical, and fundamental to us being able to make those decisions is policy certainty. So the relationship that we as individual OEMs have with the government is absolutely critical, and also as an industry body. And that partnership that we've been able to forge with the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition is absolutely critical. In my career of working for Ford Motor Company, I saw the opposite effect of seeing policy uncertainty and what it did to the Australian automotive and manufacturing setup. Yeah. Where in 2013 we took the decision to announce our closure of manufacturing in Australia because of the fact that we had no incentive program or government industry partnership that valued the importance of manufacturing and job creation that the auto industry drives. So that triggered a ripple effect, and unfortunately, no more cars are built in Australia. They're all imported, and that used to be one of the powerhouses of manufacturing, of vehicle manufacturing in the globe. So it can change very, very quickly. But this is something that we're setting up for the next 10, 20, 30 years. This is a legacy that, very pleased to say that I'm part of the leadership team creating that legacy for the future that lies ahead.
And when you talk of that future, if you look at the automotive industry, I think currently a quite significant contributor to South Africa's GDP. I think it's around 6.8%, 110,000 people employed across vehicle and component manufacturers. So firstly, when you talk about your investment, what size dent do you think that makes into the industry? And then what sort of growth targets, looking at the future, do you have for the medium to long term?
So when we look at it, so 100% correct, the industry is about 7% of GDP, and Ford Motor Company has historically contributed about 1% of that to the overall GDP number. Our real emphasis is in terms of what it means for us as a company in terms of our facilities and the longevity of that, and crucially for our communities as well, as we look to grow our volume, create jobs for the local communities, and look to expand that. So we're looking to grow that. Difficult to say where it exactly will pan out in terms of ultimate, but we wouldn't be surprised if that's a 50% plus increase in terms of our contribution as a company to the GDP of the country, and helping to grow the automotive GDP contribution as well. The Ranger is one of those vehicles where, just to give you some numbers, we're going to have the ability to produce 720 Rangers a day. 240 per shift, which equates to a Ranger coming off the line every 2 minutes, which is pretty remarkable and something that is just fantastic. But predicate, the key component that makes that happen is our export program. So, being able to supply vehicles to over 100 markets around South Africa, or around the globe, I should say, helps generate foreign income for South Africa. It entrenches us into the global supply network. And it really just makes South Africa an absolute pivotal component of the automotive industry for Ford and for other OEMs as well. So, difficult to say exactly where those numbers will pan out. We certainly have got growth aspirations in terms of where they'll go.
Yeah, and I do think COVID has made it a little bit more difficult to forecast. Clearly, the motor industry took a big knock. Globally, you heard talk of chip shortages and supply chain issues impacting the motor industry. How are you experiencing any of those issues? Before we talk a little bit more about that Ford Ranger, which I must say, just judging from a very unscientific view around the neighborhood, must be the most popular bakkie in South Africa at the moment.
Well, certainly the Ranger double cab is one of South Africa's most popular double cabs. So we take great credit, take great pride in terms of what we've been able to achieve on that. But I think just the point that you touched on there, which is the global logistics, infrastructure and chip constraints and elements like that. It's very real, and we continue to manage it literally on a day by day, week by week situation in terms of how many chips are we able to access, and who would have thought that a computer chip would actually stop a production line or limit the number of vehicles you can build. But that is the reality of where we're going in terms of the technology and the sophistication of vehicles that we're selling nowadays. I was staggered on a global town hall meeting, just yesterday, that, there's anything between 200 and 500 computer chips that go into a vehicle. And, we've seen COVID having a massive impact in terms of the suppliers of computer chips to the industry, remembering that they also supply to the consumer electronics industry as well. And one of our suppliers in Japan also had a fire in their facility, which limited their production capacity. So, globally, that's had a massive impact. And then the actual freight industry, there's a shortage, you would have thought, on containers at the moment. So the entire network is under a huge amount of stress and strain at the moment. And it is literally a day-by-day situation of managing what's coming in, the efforts that one has to go to. Okay, if you can't get it onto a ship, can you get it onto a plane? How quickly can you get it here? So yeah, it's a really interesting challenge, and COVID doesn't help either.
Yeah, from chips to ships. I think there was a headline in Reuters the other day. Inflation is proving to be a little bit more than transitory because of some of these issues. Back to the Ford 100%. Ranger. So you're investing a lot of this money into modernizing and expanding your Silverton plant ahead of this new expected Ford Ranger model of next year. What can we expect next year?
The wait, as we like to say, is almost over. This is something that we've been working on for a better part of 3 years now, and we've got a year to go. So our next gen range is going to be unveiled, sort of midterm and launch next year. So you're certainly going to see a lot more details of that. Not going to let too many secrets out of the bag at this particular point in time, but certainly we anticipate that ranges, if we look back at the impact that it had on the market when we launched here 10 years ago, we're certainly anticipating that it's going to be as big an impact on the market, because it is one of the most spoken about vehicles in South Africa when you talk about the bakkie market, which South Africans love. I mean, 1 in 5 vehicles sold in South Africa is a bakkie.
And it's because you can do anything with it. You can go anywhere with it. Camping recently with the children, there's probably more than 1 in 5 in the campsite that I was in was a double cab, and it's just and they've progressed. They're not just the hard sprung high rides that they used to be. They're quite luxurious at the moment as well. And I believe that you're also going to be making the new Amarok at the Silverton plant. How does that kind of deal work?
Well, that is a global alliance that Ford and VW have entered into, and one of the key elements that we were signed up, that Ford signed up to, was to take on the responsibility of building, engineering and building the VW Amarok. So this really provides efficiencies and opportunities for both brands, and so we certainly have very clearly stated that we're going to be building the Amarok for them. Don't know too many details of it. Naturally, we keep a lot of firewalls between the two brands and make sure that we comply with all the competitive requirements. But I think it's the industry and players in the industry looking for ways that we can offer quality vehicles and leverage efficiencies and effectiveness by partnering for benefit to the consumer at the end of the day, because that's the person who ultimately we have to serve, is looking after our customers. So that was a cooperation that both companies saw as being opportunistic and of adding value. So hence the decision for us to support and build and engineer the VW Amarok for them.
Now, operating in South Africa is obviously something that does come with challenges. Yes, you've got the government support, but there's COVID, there's Eskom, there's slow growth, all of those things. How have you managed over the last 18 months? What are your kind of key learnings, if you were to call them that, over managing through this pandemic?
I think it comes back to that phrase that they coined, which is VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And I think the last 18 months have been every single piece of that. And I've got an amazing team at Ford Motor Company of people who are just dedicated to looking after customers, to keeping the business moving forward, contributing positively to the South African economy. And, the resilience and the resourcefulness of the people who work at Ford Motor Company are truly amazing. Shout out goes to our manufacturing team. They're the guys who've really borne the brunt over the last 18 months in terms of the most severe implications, because, people who build cars are place dependent, as we would term it in Ford Motor Company. they need to come to work to put parts onto a vehicle that goes down the assembly line. And they very quickly, together with the support from our global team, came up with response mechanisms to the COVID pandemic. We learned a huge amount from our Chinese colleagues, our North American colleagues, in terms of what works in the manufacturing environment, what can we make work, and then very quickly looked at measures that we can also help not only our employees, but the country as a whole. So building face shields, for example.
Yes.
We built over 285,000 face shields for first line and health workers to keep them safe. And then very quickly worked with the Department of Health to institute a vaccination program, at both our Silverton and Struandale facilities down in Port Elizabeth, to take care of not only Ford employees, but contractors, construction workers, anybody who was on site, to be able to get vaccinations to people, which is an absolutely critical part of fighting COVID-19 and allowing the country to enjoy the benefits longer of the level 1 and hopefully further easing of restrictions as we go forward. And I think, the stats and the data proves that vaccinations are a key element of fighting or combating the spread of COVID.
And let's just hope we can overcome some of the hesitancy that has crept in. But I think with time, with more evidence of the efficacy and the safety of the vaccines, we'll be able to chip away at that, because it's not a vaccine supply issue anymore. We've got the pipeline. We just need to get people vaccinated. Now, another big issue at the moment in the media, in the world, is climate change, because we're moving rapidly to COP26 in Glasgow. You've announced a solar energy project for your Silverton plant, and you're hoping to have the plant entirely green and energy self-sufficient by 2024. And it's an interesting move, because we're also seeing the things like carbon border tariffs and taxes being discussed. So it's important that we're very mindful of the carbon intensity of the products that we export. Can you just tell me a little bit more about these plans?
Yes, certainly, Michael. We've embarked on the project, first and foremost, to get solar panels established, for example, as one of the first phases of the project that we're working on. And, we're looking for ways that, as part of a global initiative amongst Ford Motor Company, that we can reduce our carbon footprint. And looking at all of our different manufacturing facilities in terms of how do we actually work to reduce the load on, fossil fuel generated electricity. So, the solar system, for example, that we're installing is a first step in the right direction, and the company are working on further elements in that. But then it's also looking at the vehicles that we produce as well, and the vehicles that we sell, and how do we move from fossil fuel powered vehicles to other alternative energy sources, new energy vehicles, battery electric, plug-in hybrid, all of those different components. But the key element that we're looking at is how do we look at the whole ecosystem, starting from the manufacturing facility, in terms of using renewable energy sources. And there's a number of different steps that we're working on in that particular regard. If you drive past our facility in Silverton now, it looks like one of those solar farms that you see in the movies, which is truly impressive. You look at our car park. I think we've got over 4,500 parking bays now under solar, which is, just the first phase in our response that we're working towards. So very excited about that.
On the issue of electric vehicles, there's a big debate in South Africa about whether or not we've taken cognizance of this global shift enough in our policies, and whether or not the industry is engaging enough around this move to electric. What are your thoughts around the move to electric, and particularly in a country where it does look like the uptake is likely to lag for some time? We're not a developed market.
Michael, I think the industry as a whole and consumer demand is going to drive the trends. And I think it's going to happen a lot faster. I personally believe it's going to happen a lot faster than people are actually taking into consideration. So when you think about a lot of the countries that South Africa exports vehicles to, being Europe, there's already some very strong statements coming out of Europe that by 2030, internal combustion engines are no longer going to be acceptable in those markets. So we are going to have to, as an industry in South Africa, index very quickly to understand what that means. Otherwise, we run the risk of actually building vehicles that are relevant for our major customer markets. So just that aspect of it has said that, as an industry, we're engaging very actively with the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition to look at a green vehicle policy and how we move forward. personal belief is I think we're going to see electric vehicles in greater numbers in South Africa on our roads in the second half of this decade. And I think it's something that we shouldn't be fearful of. I think the initial concerns that a lot of people had around range anxiety, charging infrastructure, and all of those different elements, the industry has made massive strides in that. And if I look, for example, at our Mustang Mach-E that we sell in the US, that comes with a standard range of over 500 kilometers. If you drive between Johannesburg and Cape Town, there's charging stations every 200 kilometers. So I think we will, as an industry and as a country, we will find solutions for the challenges that everybody goes that says, well, Eskom, doesn't produce electricity. I have a view that Eskom is too large for the government to allow it to fail. It's too integral to the South African economy as a whole. So therefore, we're going to find solutions. The country will find solutions in terms of the power crisis that we're experiencing at the moment, and the move to allow companies to actually generate up to 100 megawatts of power without a license, I think is a very positive step to bring private sector into the solutions on some of these things.
Yeah, and means Operation Vulindlela is working. And I think the likes of Rudy Dixon, Sean Phillips have been set up to be the catalyst, the political catalyst to unblock the policy blockages are doing their job. They're being effective. And I, for one, can't wait for electric vehicles. Having driven a couple, they're very quick from 0 to 100. And, if you get over the range issue, my problem was I couldn't get out to Clarence for the weekend because of range anxiety. But when you start getting over that and you see the cost coming down, I do think we're going to see a massive tipping point and a big opportunity again for us to use the infrastructure that we've already got to cater for that growing market as well. Neale, again, chapeau, and I think we need to start calling this business talk, TORQUE, after the conversation that we've just had. Wish you every success in taking up your new role as president of Ford Motor Company Africa. Take care.
Michael, thank you very much, and really good talking to you, and all the best. Thank you.